he might join us, but just in case. Okay, so welcome everyone. Добро пожаловать всех. You can all hear me, right? I'm just gonna need a few nods. Yeah, that's it. Okay, at this Jubilee Roundtable of the journal Russian Literature, which is co-hosted by, it's sort of in between, I guess, a meeting and a public discussion. We haven't been advertising it wildly lively, but we are really interested in having a conversation with old and newer friends of the journal and people who make and contribute to the journal, and also people who are interested in the journal. So the roundtable of our journal, which is co-hosted by my home institution, the Department of Slavic Studies of the University of Amsterdam, and the Gorky Institute of World Literature of the Russian Academy of Sciences, to which we, that's an interesting word combination, sciences, silences, but we warmly thank both institutions for their support for this event. And once Willem joins us, I would like to thank him, especially also as our special guest. My name is Rutten. I'm professor of Russian and Slavic Studies at the University of Amsterdam and editor-in-chief of the journal, and I will be your moderator for this meeting. In a moment, I will share a few practical remarks about the setup of this afternoon, and then we start our conversation. But first, I want to share this. Let me go back to my presentation. Yes. First of all, types. This is why I want Willem to be with us, because he gave me this beautiful, enormous thing. Two of these folders with the administration of the journal since the beginning, very beautifully alphabetically ordered, lots of letters. So I simply copy-pasted, or I was toying a bit with these letters. These are typeset letters with handwritten signatures, a typo here and there, and one handwritten correction with exclamation sign of the year that the letter was sent to our journal's first editors-in-chief, Jan van der Eng, Niels Ake Nielsen, and to former editor and copy editor Erik de Haart. These are even from before Willem's time, the very early days of the journal. Clockwise, from the top left, the letters are written by such renowned names in our field as Renate Lachman, Thomas Lahusen, he corrected the year indication, and Georgi Levinton, of whose letter I included just a very small fragment to underscore the materiality and fragility of those letters. These and other archival materials, as I just said, was shared, kindly passed to me earlier this month by Willem. So early letters from authors from the journal administration. 2, a fragment from a verse on the Russian poet Sergei Yesenin, printed in the patchy typewriter fonts that you also saw in the letters and in which Russian literature appeared in the 1970s. I copied it from the first article in the first volume of our journal, so Russian Literature 1/1, published in 1971. And here you see the editorial statement that could then be read on the journal's opening pages. And I think both me, but also our production team are quite jealous of that statement. It says, Russian literature is published irregularly. Issues will appear as soon as there is enough material. Or maybe not so jealous. We are quite happy that we have a lot of material right now. Our portfolio is always very full, but it does sound like producing this journal was a slightly more relaxed endeavor than it was today. So what you see on the fragment of those verses that you see were shared by Slavic and literary scholar Vladimir Markov. He used the journal to point wider audiences to this little-known work by another poet, Kruchonek. Another poet than Yesenin, on Yesenin. Okay, then we go to my next slide. Artist Daria Sirenka at a silent picket during the day of her marriage. And she used the picket to ask attention for LGBTQ rights in Russia in 2010. The photo appeared in Russian Literature volume 96-98, so we are really making an enormous step in time now, which appeared in 2018. And which was guest edited by Mark Lipavetsky and Claudia Smola. And it was devoted to cultures of conformity, non-conformity in late and post-Soviet Russia. In this volume, and for instance, also in this volume, special issue about writer and filmmaker Sergei Tretyakov and his new visuality. In volumes like these, specialists compare literary texts to photos, films, and other visual and audiovisual objects. A 3D print bust of Stalin by students of the University of Virginia. They designed this bust in the context of a course on cultural and literary representations for which the university's Slavic department cooperated with the institution's library scholars lab. The bust appeared in our latest volume, which just came out the past month, in which we zoom in on a question that has also passed in review in other recent volumes by us. And this is the question: how do digital humanities and Slavic literary studies intersect? And what happens when you combine the two? And finally, this is just a picture of that latest issue. Finally, following this very recent 3D print photo, the oldest image in this small visual intro series that I'm sharing with you, a photo of playwright Nadezhda Tefi. Our upcoming volume, which is also our 50-year Jubilee volume, will contain analysis devoted to the journal's history and a set of 6 new analyses of Tefi's drama. And this volume is part of a twofold Russian literature publication on Tefi. It follows this really very wonderful issue, which was published last year, with 2 previously unpublished plays by her, guest editors by Thomas Keizer, Vasily Zaltzman, and also our colleague from Amsterdam, Jenny Stelleman. So welcome again, and if you feel a bit confused after these very diverse images, that's good, and that is supposed to be the case. I combined them and I shared them here to give us some examples to hold on to in the roundtable discussion that we're going to have. So they are examples that illustrate how our journal began, how it has evolved in the past years, how it started with letter writing, but also how it already started with this interest in the visual, this very literary / visual legacy of the avant-garde and of the early 20th century in Yesenin, and how this literary / visual interest has always been a big interest of the journal. They're also, I think, examples that demonstrate the very different types of analysis that Russian literature has published and still publishes today, in which it has published throughout the past 50 years. And I should add, we publish in English and Russian. This is also why we are having this conversation in English, because I want to make sure that if someone wants to join us who specializes, say, in Croatian literature, that person would not need to follow everything in Russian. We are, of course, also specializing in those languages. But I do have to say the majority of our publications appears in Russian. So anyone who wants to contribute in Russian, that's fine. So as we explain in some detail on our website, although this overview that I just showed you says a little bit more than this short introduction text that you see here, as we explain on our website, what we publish is both bulky archival finds or special issues that delve into the work of one author. The Tefi issue is an example, but also recent volumes guest edited by Anna Kletis on Pasternak and on Solzhenitsyn. We publish those types of volumes, but also special issues devoted to pioneering, conceptual, transdisciplinary, methodological problems, volumes that introduce young or promising research paradigms, or young and promising researchers, and we are, of course, always interested in publications that complicate existing thinking in the field. And this is a popular phrase to say, but I think I added that volume mark by you and Claudia Smola, because that is a good example of a volume that complicates thinking about conformity, non-conformity. I think it's not an empty claim to make for that volume. It's really meant to make things a bit harder for us, but harder in a good way. To celebrate our anniversary, we take a step back and ponder the journal's history, present, and future together with a set of specialists who all have some relationship to the journal or to its conceptual and longer-term agenda. And I want to start that conversation first by showing you our team, especially those people whom you normally do not see, who make the journal. And then I want to introduce the roundtable guests. Then we move to the actual discussion. We'll have a short break around our time, 5, so the next full hour. And then I want to make sure that we leave the half hour free for audience questions or discussion. So first, our team, you know who this first person is, and our co-editor-in-chief is Dennis Joffe, who is, oh, it still says Dennis, Universities of Ghent and Amsterdam. That is not true anymore. Dennis is now, there'll be a later slide where it's correct. Dennis is now Professor of Russian Studies at Université Libre de Bruxelles, and as said, he's also co-editor-in-chief of the journal. Maaike Hooghout is our production manager, and I added the name of our former production manager because she really only left us last July. So the volumes that you are reading now were still part of her legacy, and she was with us for several decades. But we now have a new production editor who is Maaike Hooghout. Both were based in the Netherlands. Marietta Božić, who is with us today, who is an assistant professor at Yale University and who's editor of the journal. Alexei Vdovin, also editor of the journal and affiliated to the Higher School of Economics in Moscow. And Chris Jarvin is copy editor for the journal for our Anglophone publications. And Dennis also copy edits the Russian publications. So I think without over promoting this team, I think I can safely say we're very lucky. It's a group of high profile, very precise and very committed specialists, including our copy editor and production manager, who all have training in relevant fields. So these are really all either Slavists or literary scholars. I wanted to show you these photos, as I said, because not all of these people you will get to know via other routes, especially the makers, the producers of the journal. These are the names and faces behind the journal. The names of our guests in the round table, I simply show you like this because you will see all of their faces in a moment. They are Marietta Božić, I just introduced her, Naomi Cafe, assistant professor of Russian at Reed College, and a colleague who's finalizing a new cluster for production with us. Dennis Joffe, so Dennis here, the affiliation is correct, who is now based at Université Libre de Bruxelles, and who is, as I said earlier, our co-editor-in-chief, Mark Lipovetsky, a professor of Slavic languages at Columbia University, and who published the volume that I just mentioned with us, as well as other contributions. Monika Spivak, who is senior researcher at the Imli Institute, with which we are co-hosting this meeting, and also at the Pushkin State Museum in Moscow. And Monika recently published another really splendid, I think, issue with us on newspaper practices and strategy in strategies in Russian literary history. Ksenia Romanenko, who's associate professor at the Institute of Education at the Higher School of Economics in Moscow. And she wrote a contribution to a recent cluster devoted to popular literary practices for us, which was guest edited by Natalia Samutina. And Natalia Samutina's name, together with that of Konstantin Bogomolov, these are just two names that I want to have mentioned here. They are two scholars whom we've recently lost, who cannot join us today, but who were, Konstantin Bogomolov was a long-term friend of the journal, advisory board member, and Natalia was also, for me, a very important conversation partner, published this recent cluster for us. So I just wanted to have heard their names out loud this afternoon to conclude this list of names for the roundtable. Okay, I propose that we start almost, because there's one more name to mention, and that is, I see, Willem, that you have joined us. I'm very happy to see that.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Very good. My predecessor in Amsterdam as professor of Slavic literatures and languages, but also as editor-in-chief of the journal, Willem Westijn. Two guests could not join us today. I'm going to also stop, I think, sharing my slides, because then we can see the faces of the speakers better. Who could not join us were Auge Hansen-Löwe and Vadim Polonsky, unfortunately, so they will not be in the discussion. But all the others are here. And finally, I thank Ilya Malafé, a researcher MA student in literary studies at the University of Amsterdam, who will help us with a report of this meeting, which will appear in our last volume of this year. So thank you in advance, Ilya. Okay, I start with a very plain, not question, but sort of, well, how shall I put it? Half sentence, and I want all of you to complete it, but I'm going to be strict. I really want you to finish it just with keywords and not with long sentences. So when I say Russian literature, you say, and I think I'm just going to go by the screen. So whoever of the speakers is nearest to me, I will start there. And that is Naomi Cafe. Just keywords.
So the first keyword that comes to mind is и не только. So not only Russian literature.
Excellent. Marietta Božič.
I would say a ground, a space where unusual and different voices come together.
Okay, Marietta Božič. A little bit more than keywords, but almost. Dennis Joffe. Dennis, you heard me right? Yeah, I see that you are toying with the buttons. Yeah. Or if you have trouble, we can, yeah.
It's, I think it's cultural experimentation. That would be the closest.
Thanks, nice. Ksenia Ramanenko.
I think it's very serious one.
Did you say a very serious one? Thank you. Mark Lipovetsky.
I would say fun, as opposed to very serious ones.
Thank you for this nice duo contribution. Willem Westijn.
Just the best Slavic journal in the world.
Of course. I hadn't expected another response from you, Willem. Thank you. Monica Spivak. And you're right, of course. Monica Spivak.
Я прошу прощения, у меня как-то очень много ассоциаций и слов чуть больше. Немного, но немножко больше. Авангард, модернизм, свободная мысль, антисоветская по преимуществу, тематические номера, неожиданно, совершенно неожиданно. И еще обложка оранжевая, как апельсин, как закат, и сама эта обложка сразу представляется как некоторая радость. И еще все очень срочно, а потом тишина, и уже все долго, спокойно, никто не спешит, но когда-нибудь это все будет. Можно быть уверенным. Надежность.
Oh, спасибо. So I think all of us speak Russian, but just in case, I'm checking because I know most of the faces here. Yes, I think I don't need to translate the answers, right? If anyone does want me to translate, let me know. You can also do that via the chat, but I don't think we need that. Thank you so much. Okay, well, maybe I should pick up on some of the things that especially Monica, I think, has been mentioning, the free thought, the anti-Soviet component that you are thinking of. First of all, thank you also for the orange cover, which is indeed, when I think of Russian literature, I see a color in front of me immediately, and that is indeed the cover of all of our journals. We want to see if we can publish the Jubilee issue in another color. So let's see if that's possible. But it might confuse.
No, don't do it, Ellen. Don't do it. No.
Exactly, it might actually be confusing. Oh,
50 years, the same color, the same journal. Don't change.
Living in gold, I thought. Okay, but I want to pick up on that point and Willem, ask you, in the run-up to this meeting, you and I met for coffee and I asked you, so if I would ask you about the history of the journal, what would be the things that stand out for you? Can you maybe reiterate one or two of the things that stand out most that you mentioned then?
No, yeah, when it started in 1971, Jan van der Eng arranged a journal because there was hardly a possibility for the Russian scholars at that time to publish on Mandelstam, Akhmatova, etc. And the first issues, they were very famous issues about acmeism, for instance. And I think these issues are still brilliant issues. And the reason the journal was made by Jan van der Eng was to give the opportunity to the Russian scholars who couldn't publish at that time about these poets in their own country, to make it possible for them to publish in the West their articles. And
politically motivated.
I have this, for instance, can you see it in this way? Okay. This is one of this number 7874, one of the acmeism issues. And then you see, for instance, the authors, Gardjev, Timenchik, Levin, Dmitry Segal, Vladimir Taparov, Tatiana Tsivian, Taranovsky. So these are the famous authors about who wrote about activism at that time, and these issues are really at that time they were very popular in the world, you might say, and that is the beginning of the journal. I think that was very important just to make it possible for Russian scholars to publish their articles in the West about these poets.
And can you say, before we move to another question and to some of our other guests, can you maybe also add something about what that meant for this material dimension that I was trying to show also through my images? Because this was something that you did in a very different way than if we would have to, if we would want to publish materials by Russian poets now, which are difficult to publish in Russian, that would be a completely different practice, obviously. So can you say a little bit about what that meant in practice?
For the Russian scholars, it meant that they had the possibility to do it, and they couldn't publish in their own country, and they could publish now in a journal in the West, which was very important because of course there were Western Slavists who also published about these poets, about Mandelstam, Akhmatova, etc. But the Russian scholars had other materials to publish, and of course they were their own poets, and it was very important for them that they could publish about their own poets in a journal, which was not possible at that time in their own country. And and
do I understand correctly, because with the material dimension I also meant, I remember that you told me how physically you managed in doing this. So it was either you or people from the embassy, right, who tried to get the manuscripts.
And the first possibilities were done by Jan van der Eng and his wife, Jeanne van der Eng. You know them both, I think. And they took the material first by themselves, but then they were forbidden to go into the Soviet Union. And then it was done by people who went there, but mostly by people from the embassy who sent the journals, the articles from Russia, or took them from Russia to Amsterdam to publish them with us. Yeah.
Okay, so you also needed these not Slavic experts, but experts from the diplomatic service to actually get the materials.
To get them in our country, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And can I ask you then, Monica, let me return to you, if you can say something about, I know that you've been publishing with the journal for quite some time, you've known the journal for a long time, which explains that you have different associations than some others might have when someone says the words Russian literature. So what can you say about the ways in which the journal has developed over time? Were there any differences or continuities that you noticed? I think you mentioned one continuity by mentioning the thematic issues, the avant-garde, the modernist themes have always been red threads in our publication history, I think. Which other things stand out for you? Monica?
Так, извините.
Простите, я повторяю, да-да-да.
У меня немножечко почему-то стало зависать, я как бы не услышала.
Ничего. Вот нам интересно, вот вы говорили, например, про авангард, модернизм, да, как первые ассоциации, также тематические, ну, спецномера. Что вы можете сказать про, ну, про то, как журнал то ли изменился, то ли не изменился в течение последних...
Да, я читала вопросы и пыталась про это думать, и я понимаю, почему возникает этот вопрос. И как бы ситуация подталкивает меня к тому, чтобы не ограничиться жесткой аналитикой, а ну, скажем так, объясниться в любви к этому журналу, в котором я начала печататься уже, как выяснилось, очень давно. Я посмотрела библиографию, это был 2003 год, и это очень важно, потому что любовь к этому журналу и к его оранжевой обложке, в том числе, у меня совершенно чистая и беспримесная, потому что тогда никто не знал и не считал важным такие слова, как Scopus Web of Science, и тогда никто не слышал про двойное слепое рецензирование, и поэтому никакой прагматики в этой любви и в желании печататься в этом журнале у меня не было, и привлекала прежде всего репутация журнала, который был всегда на острие самых острых и неожиданных тем. Дальше я обязательно должна сделать важное лирическое отступление, во многом ради которого я сюда и пришла, потому что Вильям Вестейн человек, исчезающий иногда с экрана, и добраться до него очень сложно, он не всегда отвечает на письма и не всегда их получает. Я должна сказать, что не только для меня, но для меня тоже прежде всего, может быть, даже, но не только для меня, но и для целого поколения славистов журнал был привлекателен не только как журнал, все-таки журналов тогда было уже много, но и прежде всего он был привлекателен тем, что главным редактором был Вильям Вестейн. И его обаяние, и его стиль поведения, и его, дальше может быть много-много характеристик научных, человеческих и прочих, привлекали в этот журнал очень сильно. И нехорошо вот так в лицо как бы красивому, здоровому, живому человеку говорить: вы великий редактор. Да? Но так как Вестейн не редактор сейчас журнала, то это никак не может быть расценено как подхалимат. И тоже не может быть здесь никакой прагматики. Поэтому сейчас абсолютно с чистой...
Все записываем, все будет потом в докладе.
Чистой, беспримесной, бескорыстной вот, как бы подачи. Хочу сказать, Вильям, огромное тебе спасибо. И я, и мы все, и целая группа, и поколение, и те, кого я знаю прежде всего, и те, кого я не знаю, мы тебе бесконечно благодарны. Я не могу сказать, конечно, что ты наш учитель вот в таком школьном варианте, да, но в каком-то большом глобальном смысле, конечно, ты наш учитель. И должна сказать, что...
I am gonna, this is not because of Willem, but I want to make sure that we...
Обнимаю тебя, Моника.
Сквозь пространство и ковидные заслоны. Вот, я хотела сказать, что работать с тобой было невероятно приятно и невероятно легко. И не потому что, да, во многом потому, что у тебя очень развит орган понимания. И ты всегда умел, мне кажется, слушать и любил слушать больше, чем говорить. Ты говорил мало, но всегда слушал так, что приятно было тебе рассказывать. И обсуждение тем журналов, тем возможных будущих номеров, это одно из самых приятных занятий, которое у нас в те времена было. Не все осуществилось, но поговорить про темы было невероятно.
So if I try to summarize, one of the things that I hear recurring in what you're saying is also that the apart from the fact that it's good to hear this enormous sympathy, but also I think professional esteem for Willem, which I also hear among other colleagues of the earlier generations who contributed to the journal, is also I think this note on informality versus formality. I think it was a much less formal period without the Scopus citation systems, in which indeed, whether we want it or not, we are all caught and trapped today. And what I hear from what you're saying is also you simply started also working with the journal out of love for the journal. I want to ask Willem, you maybe not to respond to the kind words of Monica, but I would like to ask you before we turn to the here and now, what would you say when you, I mean, I know that you're still reading the journal actively. What would you say? Are there any, I think we all know the red threads. We mentioned some of them, the avant-garde modernism. What would be the things that you say, this is really new. This is something that wasn't there in the beginning.
You mean now,
Yes.
when you took over?
Yeah, well, not necessarily when I took over. This could also be in the course of the 90s or the 2000s, the 2010s. So what really changed in your view between the period that you started and today?
That is difficult to say. What I did and what formally wasn't done, I think what was very important, we made this very big issues, special issues.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, one of my the issues I like very much is, for instance, the issue about Sigé and Nikanova.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned it to you. It is a rather fat issue, and such issues, I think, are very nice. There is also an issue, a very fat one, made by Yuri Arlitsky about Alexander Kondratov, which is also a very nice issue. There is a very big issue about Khrushchev, for instance, which I also very like. So I think a very fat issue about Khletnikov, which is my favorite. So I think these large issues, which we could publish, for instance, 3 issues in one, or even 4 issues in one, that was a possibility for our journal to do. And I can also mention, for instance, the issue, a guest red editor was Monica, for instance, an issue about Bieli, also a very thick issue.
Yes.
These issues are very nice to have in the journal. And I think this was a specialty for Russian literature, our journal, to make it possible to make these issues. And I think other journals hardly did it. I mean, other Slavic journals hardly did it.
Well, then this would also be the question that I would like to ask our editors, because I think I agree with you that at least one of the things that really, for which Russian literature really stands out in the landscape of leading periodicals in Slavic literary studies are these volumes like the one on Tefi that I showed, right? The most recent one. All in all, we are now dedicating 3 full volumes just to Tefi. This is very difficult, I think, to do for many journals. It's just not possible. But Elsevier is not nagging us. We have they are not bothering us about it. Elsevier has other problems, but this is something that's very nice about that publisher. We have the liberty to do this, and we have experts who come to us and also ask us, can we please publish this specialist volume? So this is one thing with which we stand out. But I would like to ask Marietta and Dennis, I don't know if one of you wants to start. Maybe because we do the history thing, Dennis, we start with you. You've been with the journal longer than you also.
I would suggest
the longest of all of the current editors. What would you say? How does Russian literature differ from other journals in the field?
I think there are 2 main points that we can mention here. First of all, the group of journals against or in contrast with or in comparison with we are positioning ourselves, I would mention CH Slavic and East European Journal, or the 2 reviews, Slavic Review or Russian Review. So on the one hand, we are not declaratively interdisciplinary. That means that we are not dealing with politics, anthropology, history. Yeah? So we are decidedly focused on Russian literature. That already shows some point of important contrast. But on the other hand, exactly as Willem and Monica already mentioned, we are able to produce those magnificent, monumental, special volumes, special issues focused on one bombastic or even minuscule topic that is simply not done by other journals, because we have this freedom, this publishing freedom, and traditionally we are doing that. So I would say, я бы сказал, что вот эти два момента отличают нас наибольшим и наиболее таким ярким образом от остальных флагманских журналов, которые работают в славистике. И, как я отметил, вот эти 3-4 журнала американские, по сравнению с которыми мы не разделяем такую интердисциплинарную повестку дня, мы более сфокусированы на литературе персе, собственно, это исходит из нашего заглавия нашего журнала, и это невероятная свобода в организации совершенно невероятных специальных особых томов, которые мы традиционно делаем. Я думаю, что это как бы довольно значительные такие точки, в которых мы отличаемся.
Could you then, Marietta, that would be my question to you. I think I've also always really enjoyed the fact that in Russian literature, we just know that literature is always the, I don't know how to call it, but like the stержен on which everything is, around which everything is revolving. On the other hand, you could also say we are, well, what makes the journal so exciting is that we are interdisciplinary, but in a very different way. So we do couple, for instance, literary to visual analysis, to the digital humanities types of studies that we are working with now, maybe to social cultural analysis, to musical studies, but literature is always at the core. I wondered how you look at that, Marietta, and I'm asking you in particular also because I know you're guest editing a couple of volumes where this intersection comes into play, but literature does always remain at the heart of the projects.
It's exciting to see also the journal evolve and include more comparative cultural work, especially looking at visual media. And as some of the earlier references to the avant-garde show, that was also always the core mission of the journal. I think I want to draw attention also to something I try to bring up in my not quite keywords, the mixing of voices, which is something that's very important to me. This is a journal where scholars from the Russian Federation, Europe, all over the world, the US, publish together, which I find to be very different than most of the other journals, or the extent to which that mixing takes place on the pages of Russian literature. I would say our field has been shaped, scarred by Cold War. Even today, when you would expect instantaneous communication to make global exchange more and more possible, I think we still look at very divided academic, intellectual communities across the world. And this is one of the places where I see genuine exchange. So to me, this is the most exciting thing about Russian literature. And
it's not just what the content is about, but also the type of voices who speak up. Yeah, interesting. Is there someone who wants to, because I've picked people so far, but if there's someone who wants to add anything to that, please feel free to. Also, people from the audience, if you do feel there's something very urgent.
Add, of course,
Willem, please do.
What we can add, of course, is that the journal from the beginning published in English and in Russian.
Yes.
And for instance, the American and the English Slavic journals only publish in English.
Mm-hmm.
And this journal from the beginning had Russian and English articles in Russian and English. And that is very important, I think, for the let me say, the worldwide importance of this journal, that we could assemble Russian scholars writing in Russian, Western scholars writing in English together. So that is very important, I think, for the journal.
Yeah, and of course, people here don't always look behind the what is it called, behind the scenes. But it may be good to know that this has not, at least in the merely 5 years that I've been with the journal, it has not always been self-evident. Especially when I started, there was a phase where we really had to defend this choice.
Yeah.
But I think we did a very good job, and right now we are fine again. So we also don't get questions about what the exact percentage is. So if you submit materials for the journal, that is indeed specific for this particular journal. It doesn't matter which language you choose. Well, we try to keep it mixed indeed, but there is not a specific percentage that we have as an idea in mind. And then this has also always been an important feature of the journal for me. I think Marietta linked to this idea of mixing of voices, and for me also something that links Russian literature to a journal that seems very different, but which is the journal where I started my editorial career, which is Digital Icons, of course, which Vlad Strukov is still lead editing, where contributors even publish, if I remember correctly, because it's been 5 years, in Russian, English, and German. So that's 3 languages. And I think those are 2 very rare examples of journals where that happens, this publication in multiple journals. Of course, in the German tradition, it's a little bit more common, right? I think WSA, Wiener Slavistische Almanach, has multiple publications, but I think that's German-Russian, right?
That's German-Russian mostly, yeah, and sometimes English, but we have Russian and English, and that is worldwide, I think, very important.
Yeah, exactly. It may seem just another language, but it means that you bring in the American.
Because the Americans do not read German, so that is not important for them. That's for the Germans only. No?
Some do, but many don't.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to think if I want to. I think I would like to ask one more question to some of you here whom we haven't heard yet, and then I propose that we have a short break. And I'm aware also, Mark, of I think we discussed a time slot, but I think we should be perfectly fine. Okay. What I would like to know is, maybe Mark, indeed, we start with you. And then I would also like to hear Naomi Cafe on this topic, whom we haven't heard yet. What is it like for you to, well, maybe not just what is it like, I would like to talk with you about editing special volumes for us. So what I'm wondering about is, what role can this specific practice, we mentioned it several times now, of editing special volumes for us, totally abadnom after totally on a new conceptual direction. What role can that play for readers? So this option to delve so very deeply into one methodological problem or one author. I don't know, I see Naomi and Mark nodding both. So maybe if one of you says,
Naomi first.
Yeah, okay, Naomi.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Mark.
Well, yeah. For me, the big advantage was being able to see a given topic or author or methodological problem from a number of different sides. So I was fortunate enough recently to put together a special issue dedicated to Russophone literature, which we defined quite broadly to include literature written in the Russian language, but by authors who do not consider themselves to be Russian. And when I was thinking first about putting together this topic, I had attempted in the past to do some research on it, but I was very much limited by the specific authors and contexts that I was interested in. And so for me, that was a handful of writers, mostly from Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. I had a notion that there was Russophone literature going on other places in the world, but I wasn't really able to see beyond that, my own little silo. And so when we put together this special issue, I was amazed at the common threads that started jumping out to me in Russophone texts from Belarus and Ukraine and from emigre writers living in the United States. And also these connections started to emerge not only from traditional genres and traditional media, poetry, novels, etc., but sitcoms, fairy tales. What else did we have? Speculative fiction, dystopian visions. But in all of these cases, I found connections emerging. So all of these authors were interested in code switching, the enmeshing of words and ideas and perspectives from non-Russian language into Russian language texts, thinking of new ways to re-envision the nation and national traditions of writing outside of an either-or paradigm. And new attention to, as we've mentioned before, digital methods of distant reading or hyper reading, machine reading, and paying attention to the real effect of globalization on the way that texts are produced and circulated and interpreted. So for me, it's been a really eye-opening experience. And I think also for the readers who are going to encounter this special issue, will see authors and contexts put side by side that wouldn't normally be. And so I think this is offering us, the special issue offers us anyway, in my experience, a chance to break out of certain silos.
Yeah, maybe the unexpected that you were mentioning before, Monica, wasn't it? The неожиданное. That's a word that I remember from your list. And what I understand from your answer, Naomi, is also this is not just interesting because then you get a quirky combination, but it actually brings new conceptual threads that you hadn't thought about before, right? Related to bigger issues like globalization or otherization. Okay, thank you. That's very interesting to hear. Mark, would your experience, does it resemble that of Naomi, or are there other things that you get out of?
It certainly does resemble that of Naomi, but I don't want to repeat. I would rather add something else. So I was co-editing the special issue with Claudia Smola on the nonconformist literature, and it was a very rewarding experience in many ways. So, and I also participated as a contributor to a couple of special issues. And while preparing to this conversation, I looked at the website of the journal, where we can look at the article collections as a special rubrics. And so here are the most recent special issues: Digital Humanities, Russian Newspaper Strategies and Practices of the first half of the 20th century, The Representation of Peasants and the Narod in the mid-19th century, Популярные литературные практики, TEFI, Anthropocene and Russian Literature.
Aren't they all beautiful? Yeah.
Sands of 19th century Russia, the lyrical subject in contemporary Russian poetry, Russian Gothic, Sergei Tretьяков, Pasternak, Solzhenitsyn, Here's Ours, etc. If you look a little down, because there are others, you will see the list of many other special issues. But I noticed, I think that's quite obvious for anyone who looks at this, that recent special issues more focus on certain problems and certain aspects, and rather than individualities, right? Rather than personal files, so to speak, of the authors. Although, of course, you have TEFI and
more. I cannot tell you all the
names.
names.
Kondratov was before, a little bit before, but of course, Pasternak, Solzhenitsyn, etc. And looking at the what has been produced in this area of special issues more or less recently, I would say that it is sort of an operative mapping of the field to which we all belong. It's some kind of the, I don't know, reconnaissance mission, so some kind of the scouting mission, right? Which shows how effective is this approach, this method, this angle, this material, right? And I'm very happy that, as Ellen said, although literature remains at the center of the attention, it is not limited by literature anymore, and there is room for different cultural practices, to film, to new media, to performances, and I think that's a very productive development, and this is exactly where our field is inevitably moving, but remaining our field nevertheless, not turning into I don't know, sociology or just pure history or cultural anthropology, although maybe using many of their methods, right? But nevertheless, there are some. So I would say that it is crucial to keep the high speed of producing of these special issues. When the special issue is produced, as we know, there are precedents at other journals, of course, never at Russian literature, produced 5 years after the submission of articles, then this scouting mission is completely sort of inflated, right? So the special issue, I think, is indeed the priority, and they should appear as fast as possible. And I think that they should be promoted as loudly as possible. I'm very upset that my favorite, I should admit this, journal doesn't have a Facebook page. How does it happen?
We do.
I checked.
We do. I will show it later. Yes.
I
yes.
wasn't sure. I don't know what happened.
1,000 subscribers.
All right. So I'm not among them, obviously.
But Mark, I do take your.
But I checked. You know, guys.
Yeah, I take this as an invitation to see how we can make it yet more visible. We have a Twitter page, and we sort of, because Dennis and Alexei are doing very hard work on the Facebook page. It's a tough job. They keep posting the abstracts of all the articles.
So then I take away my complaint.
Well,
it's my individual problem.
Well, we can always promote it yet more loudly, because the fact that you hadn't seen it and couldn't find it.
Maybe you search Russian literature, you have to add like Elsevier, because there's so many Russian literature. When you add Elsevier, then you get the results. Maybe that's the reason.
How would an ordinary user like me know that?
Elsevier, because Russian literature is just too general.
Okay, but that's an invitation to keep really promoting also that page. I'm trying to think of what would be the right metaphor to use, because especially the operative mapping of the field, I think, sounds very useful. We're having conversations also about this at editorial meetings, where we really try to think what is. Thank you, by the way, Gerame, for sharing the Facebook page in the chat. What are really the new things, the new developments in the field that we should share with our readers? We'll return to this also later. And actually, I mean, many kind words have been said, but I'm also very curious to hear what we're not doing or what we're missing in the second half of this discussion. But I'm trying to look for the right metaphor, because at the same time, I do really love also the issues on Pasternak and Solzhenitsyn and Teffy. And as I said, there are more coming, but I just cannot tell you all the names yet, because they still have to go through peer review. Teffy is beyond, so I can be open about that. So I'm trying to think, maybe you could see them as what are they called? Like in the beams that you would have underneath the ceiling, for instance. We still also really, I think, need that delving into one author or one biography to keep the archival, just the map, the documenting about one author going. And then meanwhile, this operative mapping combines, I think, really well with that. Does that sound like a doable metaphor? Maybe either Mark or Dennis. I think, Dennis, you've also been we've often had conversation about this, right? What is the right way to think about both these more specialist volumes and the ones that are more, specialist as in biography driven? So that's not specialist, but more biography driven volumes, and the conceptually driven volumes. What would you say, Dennis? What would be the right way?
I started preparing guest editors a long time ago, when the year I finished my PhD, 2008, which I prepared the PhD under supervising of William, of course, so I'm his formal disciple. I prepared this volume together with Zhenya Dobrenko, and this was a triple issue, quite fat one, focused on Stalin's philology, which brings us again to this discussion of what should be the topics or subjects that we can choose. For us, the main direction that served as a guideline was to do something that was not yet actively prepared by other scholars or in other venues. I think that was the main impulse that somehow guided us. to do something that was not done, that's as banal and simple as it sounds, and to try to see which colleagues can join us. We, together with Zhenya Durenko, we worked in an old-fashioned way. We just approached those experts who are known, who are active in the field, and we just discussed with them the possible collaborations of that. Two ways. There's no ideal way of producing a great special issue. It can be done approaching the known experts, or it can be done via call for papers. There is no ideal solution. It can be also a combination of the two. And then the future volumes, the second one I think was the volume focused on Stalin's period and laughter, which I prepared with Sergei Ushakin, which also represents something that was not exactly researched before this laughter topic. I remember when I approached some colleagues in the publishing field, they were kind of surprised how come that you dare dealing with laughter and Stalin. These two topics are incomparable, they cannot be put together. But still, we went forward, and I think we produced quite interesting special volume with Sergei. And then that's one direction, doing something that was not produced before. The other possibility is to strengthen the existing fields of specialty, like the special volumes which I prepared focused on Russian modernism, which of course is a broad general almost discipline, but it's always good to just keep the same direction and produce more research that would strengthen also journals' expertise, which, as most of you know, traditionally focuses on modernism, on avant-garde, and on all stuff that are related to experiment. So these two directions, doing something that was not yet done at all, something experimental and innovative as much as our scholarship permits, or just doing something that would serve as a continuation of previous studies that already appeared in the framework of our journals. I would say that we can continue this line, pretty much adding new unexpected clusters, unexpected points, but this approach proves to be quite successful and fruitful.
Yeah, so I think that's the different answers that I hear all sort of revolve around that idea of a combination of what Mark calls the operative mapping of the field, and the new topics. I think what you mentioned also, Dennis, laughter and Stalin, bringing that together in an unexpected way, but also some of the topics that we just saw on the list that Mark shared, while at the same time expanding this very rich heritage of the journal in biography-driven volumes, but also in modernism or avant-garde expertise, in which we, of course, have a very strong heritage too. Okay, maybe Monica, would you want to have a last comment on this question, and then we have a break after that, on the question of what role these special volumes can bring for us?
Так, я не знаю, хорошо это или плохо, но весь мой опыт сотрудничества с Russian Literature – это опыт сотрудничества исключительно в тематических номерах.
Да.
Безумно нравится и безумно интересно, и те, к которым я не имела отношения, нравятся, скажу честно, гораздо больше, чем те, к которым я имела отношения.
Ну, притом и то, да, вы именно для нас составили номер про Белого, но также номер про газетные практики, которые совершенно разные виды спецномеров.
Я хотела сказать, что в выборе вами тематики номеров существует некоторое безумие. Вот. Это безумие в каких-то случаях шокирует, скажу честно. Я не говорю про новые темы, современные темы, я не говорю про антропоцен или цифровую технологию. Это хорошие модные темы, останутся ли они также навечно в репертуаре журнала, как авангард или модернизм, это покажет время, да? Но это эксперимент, и это хорошо. Но отдать какой-нибудь номер под материалы преференции или еще страшнее того, под работу какого-нибудь одного автора, это, конечно, с точки зрения журнального менеджмента, на мой взгляд, безумие. Но и как в одном из первых номеров был номер целиком посвященный работе Топорова о Жуковском, так и сейчас Стефи, я вижу в этом безумии некоторую преемственность. Вот. И хотела сказать, что сам журнала и выбор этих тематических номеров выдает в руководстве журнала не менеджеров, а именно ученых. Это было у Вестейна, это есть у нового руководства. И мне кажется, это очень важное достоинство журнала, что именно ученые стоят у руля.
Yeah. I think that this is also why I mentioned that the slightly bumpy period that we had a couple of years ago, where it seemed for a moment as if there were going to be quite some pretensi to the editors on a more management-driven or corporately driven approach to the journal. But luckily, we are in calmer waters now, and we can simply continue to indeed operate, driven by curiosity and the longing for both conceptual innovation and expanding existing knowledge. Okay, I propose that in a moment we have a break, but I want to do one last thing. Ksenia Romanenko, we're going to return more than once to you in the last half hour of this meeting. Because you are the newest friend of the journal, maybe to put it that way. You've been publishing of all the guests here, I think most recently with us. Well, I think Naomi also, but that was about the cluster question. But just to check with you, is there anything you want to add to this first half of the discussion, or would you prefer us to continue after the break? So is there anything that you think, this hasn't been said, and this is something I would like to add to the first half?
I will prefer to add in the second part, because it was very pleasant and interesting to hear about the history of the journal, because I'm a new person here.
We're going to look at the future then together with you and some others. Okay, I propose that we return here at let's say a bit more than 5 minutes, 12 past or so. So it's a short break. But then if that's okay, are there people who think we should have a longer break? No, is that okay? Okay, so let's say 6 minutes or so from now, we see each other. Until soon. Okay, I propose that we slowly start again. Yes, I see people returning to seats. Good to see you back. There are two more questions that I want to ask, and I know that Mark has to leave us at 5:30, so I'll first ask a question which I also want to hear Mark, but we'll start with Ksenia, as promised. So the first question that I would like to ask is one of the things that were seductive in a way, especially when we were in the midst of the COVID pandemic in 2000. I already forget the year, 20. But also this past summer, when I saw all the climate, this enormous urgency of climate change around me. And please remember, we are based in Amsterdam, right, where the fear of simply the city sinking is rather well, not unrealistic. So these are major social transitions which feel very urgent. You could think, as this may be a scholarly journal, it may be a journal about Slavic literatures, but it's still very important that you connect to those problems. On the other hand, you could think, but because it is a scholarly journal, it's also important, and a journal on Slavic literatures, it's also important not to overstate the importance of, you know, that feeling of urgency. So maybe first to you this question, Ksenia, how topical or urgent should Russian literature issues be? What would your view on that question be? How important is it that you read about what COVID does with maybe how poets respond to that, what it does on a more fundamental level to our field, maybe not just as a theme, but also on other levels?
Thank you. I'm thinking about urgency in scholar topics a lot in different disciplines. And I guess that real urgency is not in a situation when we are begin write about COVID or about some ethical scandals, but I think the real and interesting for me urgency is to find where the situation, where these situations conflicts with some core situations about literature. For example, not topics about COVID, but not poems about COVID, but for example, new ways of communication or new topics about loneliness. And I guess this is the most interesting, when some critical and urgent situation can help us find some core and very deep topics in literature, for example.
And I think that the way you answer this question also matches with with the type of angle that was central in the thematic volume to which you were contributing, right? That was the volume on popular literary practices. That was not so much a volume devoted to one particular writer or topic, but more to new literary practices, right? It seems to me that this is what you're talking about now as well, or am I wrong?
I think this too, and also I'm about such a position when extra context help us understand something about the core of literature, for example, about meanings, about practices, about plots, about the type of communication between writer and readers. But I'm and at the same time, I'm very skeptical about just mentioning popular and urgent topics themselves.
Yeah, I see your point. And just for those who are not familiar with that issue, so the volume to which Xenia contributed had, among other contributions, analysis of fan fiction. This was your own contribution. Text written by, well, what would be your definition of fan fiction? I prefer you to give the definition. By fans, but I think
by fans. Non-commercial, non-professional literature written by fans, with a lot of exceptions, of course, and yeah.
So fans, for instance, of, I don't know, Harry Potter, but they could also be fans of Yevgeny Onegin, who then write their own narrative. So that's a very different type of practice than we often discuss in our journal, where we look more at professional writers. And the same volume also included a contribution by Vera Zvereva, for instance, on trolling as a literary practice. But I won't delve into that volume in more detail now, but I think it matches a bit what we're talking about now, these new practices that we sometimes see. Mark, so my question also to you, how topical or urgent should future issues be? How important is that? I know that the answer is not a straightforward, yes, it's just important, but what would your answer be?
I think to an extent, and I think that Russian literature's typicality is different from typicality of the newspaper, right? So we have different field, different optics, and see different stuff, right? To continue what I was talking about, I can say that the journal sort of has added two new dimensions in addition to the history of literature, 18th, 19th century, and modernism, avant-garde, and postmodernism that became sort of a part of that development. It definitely is creating the branch that is exploring contemporary literature and culture in a broader sense, right? And I think it sort of has an embryo of the branch developing towards film and new media in general. But of course, these two parts are overlapping, but I can see that they may bifurcate as well. So if we are talking about typicality, I think it should be either be associated with rereading, re-evaluating, reassessment, reconceptualization of history, or with the development of these two buds, so to speak, on the sort of trunk of the Russian literature as imagined as a tree. So this kind of typicality is I think, very important for us. And also, of course, there is pragmatics, so to speak. There is pragmatics of teaching and having, once again, a special issue that is dedicated to the subject that can be easily translated into the course, into the university course, college course, is, of course, a great advantage. A great advantage, and this is something that where interests of the journal and readership can meet, right? And probably with the thought about such subjects, the journal can commission some special issues, not just follow.
We do that a lot already.
You do?
Yeah,
all right,
yeah.
I'm sorry. So again, my mistake.
Well, we can always do it more. And I remember also that we were in touch with you as one of our advisory editors, I think, on interesting lines of thought to follow. So it's always good to keep in conversation about that question, you know, what sorts of issues should you then commission? And I think it's interesting that what you say about specific type of topicality, I think that also that's also what I see in your own work. So the studies that you do, they are also, I think, clearly fed by problems that you are thinking about that have to do not just with technical, literary, analytical matters, but also with, you know, how life is evolving right now. But it's a very specific type of topicality. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and this thanks also for the suggestion on the school. You know, the pragmatics, because when I think, for instance, Dennis, of this volume that you produced with, I think it was Evgeny Pavlov, Politics and Poetry, or the very recent volume, Marietta, that you have now produced for us, Digital Humanities and Slavic Studies, you know, they can really be used very easily in the classroom, especially the introductions for students. So those are important points to take on board. Dennis, I already mentioned your volume. Would you want to add anything on that question?
I think all these are excellent suggestions, but we have to always see the quality of submissions, the originality of conclusions. But I would like to mention something completely different. I would say that there is also room to stress traditional hardcore publications, like the new project that we have started. We are going to publish previously unknown materials by Mayakovsky and Kruchonych. This is a collaboration with Rogali. There is a special group of Rogali and Wyższa Szkoła Ekonomiki, and we are about to publish Mayakovsky's notebook with commentaries and discussions, and then we will publish Kruchonych's notebook. Расшифровка, то есть сами тексты, но также, что не менее важно, у нас есть возможность, мы публикуем и сами сканы рисунков Крученых, его как бы работу как художника. Мы делали подобные вещи, журнал делал вот в замечательном томе, который Вильям уже упоминал, это том Сигея и Никоновой. Там тоже есть замечательные, красивые сканы. И вот это будет сейчас продолжено в будущем году в отношении Маяковского и Крученых. И есть также много других авторов, чьи эго-документы, чьи записки не были никогда опубликованы, очень важных, больших авторов, типа того же Маяковского, да, который мы намерены в будущем публиковать с научным комментированием, с расшифровками и с добавлением статей исследователей. Вот блог по Маяковскому будет с Андреем Ромахиным, который тоже написал для этого большую статью. То есть мы наряду с исследованиями очень новыми и экспериментальными, мы также, я надеюсь, будем продолжать и очень гипертрадиционные публикаций, которые, собственно, и сделали вес нашего журнала в прошлом. Я надеюсь, что это продолжится и в будущем тоже.
Yeah, and I think this is indeed also, this could almost be an editorial meeting, because we often return to this point about how important it is to have both new volumes about questions that really seem to be in the air right now, or methodological innovations that are in the air right now, and to keep also, you know, what is the right word, digging in the archives for the sake of digging it, well, not just for the sake of digging in the archives, but for the sake of expanding existing knowledge, not necessarily with already a given outcome or societally important aim in mind. I think that is actually what makes the work also for this journal so magical. In fact, Anna Kretis, I see that you are here, right, with us, yeah, at IMLI. I remember at a previous Russian literature meeting, one article that I mentioned, which for me really epitomizes that search for understanding history and unearthing important materials from archives, was a very long article in the volume that you guest edited for us about Pasternak. I think the author's last name is Mankosu, if I remember correctly. I think it was 75 pages, and I said then, and I will repeat now, do not try this at home. So we are not happy if everyone submits submissions this long, but that was an extremely important, I think, really also стержневая публикация для нас, именно потому что там происходит вот это вот очень, well, this very hard work of pulling together the threads of what you find in the archives, annotating what you find there, linking the materials to literary analysis, without having in mind in advance an idea about, okay, this has to lead to some sort of topical outcome. So I think it's interesting to also see in this discussion, to see that as a red thread returning. Yes, I know, Mark, that you have to leave, and we just managed, because this was also the last question that I wanted to ask Mark. I think it's good if we do have some time for discussion. So what I would like to ask is very short responses to
Can I ask a question, Ellen?
Yes, of course.
Are you talking with the editors about contemporary literary theory as well? Because, for instance, lyricology is a very important item nowadays. After narratology, it is now lyricology. Are you talking about these questions of contemporary literary theory as the editors, or
we certainly are, but I think this particular topic immediately for me simply evokes the well, what it means is that I want to talk now with you about this particular concept and about commissioning a new edited volume on that topic, because I think this would be specifically about lyricology. We haven't talked, but those are, I think, exactly the sorts of stylistics could be another example. I think Alexei, who I think you did join us, right? I think the volume that you produced on peasants to me also seems a volume that comes to mind here, which is really not just about methodological innovation, but really new turns and twists to existing literary theoretical questions that we talk about. So Alexei, correct me if you think differently about this, but I would say lyricology would be just the sort of topic that really lends itself to,
First of all, my apologies for being late, because I was just teaching the day and just I'm free to join you. And of course, we as editorial board and editorial team try to maintain multiplicity of methodological approaches, which flourishes now around all the humanities, and lyricology or Anthropocene or still narratology or cognitive narratology or narratology and many other methodological frames and approaches coexist now in the field. And I think our goal is to not to privilege one or another, but to make them grow organically as a kind of ecosystem, and we need to have to give chance for scholars to choose their own fashion or style or approach they want to disclose any topic, I would say.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Alexei. Also the point on not privileging one particular line of thought or school. And Willem, so the short answer is, let's return to this and let's think about who could guest edit such a volume for us, because I would love to. Last question. I would like just to ask for a few very short responses so that we have time for audience questions and comments if people want to. We already talked a bit, I think, about the journal's future, and I think this passed in review already, that question. But also, I'm very happy that we have many positive things to say about the journal, but to make sure also that we're not just being self-congratulatory, I would love to also hear from you. So what are we maybe still missing? I think the lyricology is an interesting example of an angle that, to my knowledge, we're not yet looking at. What are other angles, topics, methodological conundrums that you haven't seen yet in the journal that merit our attention? So first, I would like to ask a few of our speakers, and then we can either conclude or people from the audience can add suggestions or other questions. Naomi, what would you say? What do you want to be on our menu?
Well, on the one hand, this is kind of a difficult question to answer because I know what I like to read about and what I'm interested in, and I don't necessarily want to prescribe that for a literary journal. But I would say the topic that seems to be, well, and this is in line with the special issue on Russophone literature that I'm putting together that's forthcoming. I'm very interested in different aspects of what Kevin Platt has called the transnational turn in Russian literary studies. I'm interested in seeing different approaches to literature written in Russian outside of Russianness or at the boundaries of Russianness, or negotiating or calling into question what we consider Russian literature or culture to be around the world. And there's a lot of different things that fall into that category, different topics that are interesting to me. This notion of trans-languaging or writing across different languages, Russian included, is something that is emerging in my special section that I think also is we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of the possibilities of how to approach that and what kinds of tools we can take from our toolbox to look at that. And just in my own case, I'm very interested in seeing more about the internal diversity of Russian language writing within the Russian Federation and how the transnationality is embedded in various contexts within Russia even, or within the Russian metropole. So.
And do I understand correctly from your response that would you say there is, of course, already there is Kevin Platt's book, there is, who is it? Well, there are other studies on transnational Russian studies, so to say, but specifically the transnational Russian literary studies, that would be what you would want to delve into in more detail, right?
Yes, I'm very interested in the texts themselves. Because I think this question, to my mind, is there's a lot to say about it from the perspective of theory, and I'm interested, and I think there's a lot more to be said about when we actually look to the texts.
Yeah. What happens when you take that question to concrete empirical texts? Mm-hmm. Okay, and then you want to see new concepts and patterns come out, right? As for this volume, yeah, interesting. Ksenia, you already, in a sense, you already shared some suggestions for interesting topics for us, but which other topics, methodological questions deserve our attention in the near future?
As a person as a specialist in non-professional literature, I'm thinking my first thing that the journal Russian literature is about, good literature, whatever it means, about winners, about canon, and even if it's modernism and avant-garde, it's about winners and good literature. So my suggestion or my idea is about bad literature, about losers, about persons outside literature canon in different meanings, in para-literature, etc., etc.
Nice. Literature and failure also, in a sense, which is a topic that I'm writing about also. So I can see and share that interest. Very interesting. Yeah. And again, I see this point on who is writing it, the practices, not so much just the texts themselves, but you're also interested in the literary wit, I think, to put it with a very classic term or traditional term, literary theory. Marietta, maybe one of the, or actually, maybe Marietta / Alexei. Alexei, we haven't heard you yet fully in the discussion, but I also don't want to eat too much audience time. Maybe just a very brief response from both of you as our two editors here. What would you say? What do we still need in the future? Or do you say, I prefer to let the audience speak? I leave it up to you. Marietta, you want to start?
If I may, just I would prefer to let the audience speak, because of course we have some suggestions, but it's very interesting to hear maybe the other side of barricade.
Marietta?
I'll say equally briefly, race ethnicity studies is emerging more and more as something that we want to see produced more of in our field and in a way that is distinctive to our field. Studies of other peoples of the Russian Federation, not to mention other parts of the former Second World. Yakutia, Sakha is producing incredible cinema. This is what I'm very interested in seeing more of.
Yeah, thanks. And then indeed, I think that we should turn to our audience. You are either very free about audience, and also, I mean, we are an intimate company. There may actually be people watching us now via YouTube. If you are doing that and you want to join us, please do. I think everywhere where we share the stream link, we also share the Zoom link. But if some of the speakers want to add something, that's fine too. So is there anything else that you think, now that we are sitting here together, this is something that I would like to bring in as an important topic, methodological problem, theoretical problem that should be looked into? I'll give you some time and some Zoom silence. And if nothing immediately comes to mind, we can also, or you can return to this later, that's perfectly fine. We can also open the floor to questions more broadly. So anything that we discussed that still leaves open questions, please feel free to share them. Maybe Nina, I'm not sure if you are actually also still actively with us now. I'm very happy. I was very happy to see Nina, but I know that she has to, I think, go in and out. So I'm not sure if I'm going to see a response now. No, not immediately, because I was curious to hear Nina's view on things. And Nina is co-producing, right, Naomi, this volume with Naomi Cafe.
Yes.
We were in touch about the roundtable in advance. No, okay, we're going to leave the Nina route for what it is right now. Any questions that you have for our speakers? Well, let me then just ask our guests at IMLI, Anna, and I'm not sure, there are two of you there, right? Что мы не обсудили? Что вам хотелось бы, чтобы, ну, о чем мы бы думали тут, или на что рефлексировали бы?
I thought I can't say something anything new, and I can't say about the new subjects. But what I would like to see in the journal is the field for archive publications, the wide field of archive publications. Of course, it is my own interest now, and I see a lot of things, a lot of materials in archives, and of course I want to publish them. So I think it's very important for the modern science, for our researchers. I would like to see them on the pages of Russian literature too. And I think also that the combination, the connection of different fields of art is also very important. Of course, journal does it very often, and I think that to continue it, it's very important also, because now the world is not, literature now is not the center of the humanities, but all other arts are very important, and it's very important to see the connections between them. So I think that it's also a very good subject for the journal.
Yeah, I think this is also something for which you are doing important work for us and have done. So the link between literature and theater, for instance, but also literature and music, something that I mentioned earlier. Literature and new media, which was an important...
Excuse me, I wanted to add, Denis said that the journal includes different images, pictures, scans, and now in the new issue of devoted to the theater, which I'm collecting now, there will be also the audio archive material, which is yes, it's I think it's a new one, something new one in the journal.
Wow. Do you also mean that you would want us to actually publish audio archival material?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Right. And then he said that it's possible.
Yeah, it's possible to not on the paper, but on the website.
Yes, very exciting. Yeah, actually, for me, what always was a highlight in my previous life as editor at Digital Icons was the fact that Roman Leibov, one of Russia's first bloggers, produced a ringtone, especially for the journal. I was very proud of that achievement, which is not necessarily hardcore scholarly, but Roman Leibov certainly is an important, I think, also thinker in that field. So those types of audio, well, the alternation of text with audio is very interesting. Nina did respond, meanwhile, by the way. She is here, she's enjoying the discussion, but she's having problems with the microphone and the camera. So thank you so much, Nina. You're also asking for a recording. I'm not entirely sure if there is, but even if there isn't, Ilya Malafey is diligently writing along. So I will rework parts of this discussion into a long editorial in the upcoming Jubilee issue. Yes, I see that Nina is happy to hear that. Thank you. And thank you also, Anna. Yeah, I think this archival, making sure that we keep returning to archival materials is very important. Dennis, it's good, I think, also that you mentioned from the upcoming volumes, apart from the TEFI one, also the one on avant-garde, and this very exciting volume with the, what is the right word? I think not the scanned pages, right? Yeah, exactly. So those are the sorts of materials that indeed I think are very useful for us to keep producing. Any other either suggestions that people want to make or questions that you have? I also know it's a long sit, so don't worry if you don't. Naomi, I think you do, to judge from your movements.
Oh, no, actually, I was just telling Nina, thanking her for coming.
Yes, it's very good to see her with us. Okay, so then anyone else? Yeah, Willem.
I would make a plea for hardcore literature. For instance, a special issue about 17th century Russian literature. That would be very nice. Something like that. Yeah. And we had some issues in the past about old Russian literature, but only a few ones. And I think it would be very good to open this field again. I said 17th century literature, that would be a very nice issue, I think, especially this century, about which hardly anything is written. And more about these early phases of Russian literature would be very interesting to have also in our journal.
Yeah, I also see this now in my own institution, well, in your institution, the University of Amsterdam, where I'm now chairing the Department of Foreign Languages at large, so also other languages. And I see discussions there or calls for pleas for instance, appointing new staff specialized really in the older literary history, but staff which specializes in such a way that they can also show students why it's really important that we keep studying those earlier historical periods. I think the 17th century would be absolutely fantastic. One of the other things I think that we talked about at another Russian literature meeting, the one in Moscow a couple of years ago, was a wonderful article that I forgot the name of the author. Somebody wrote for us about, I think, the cosmic worldviews of Avakum and Polonsky, and the author compared their worldviews. It was a very good analysis. And I remember reading it in the library of the building where I'm working. And that was really the first morning that I was reading manuscripts for Russian literature and thinking, oh, what a wonderful job do I have. And it's really important to keep mingling. I think also your image, Marietta, of mixed voices is so very important, not just of mixed voices of scholars from, you know, Germany, the United States, Russia, Asia, but also mixed voices as in, you know, people studying COVID, loneliness, and new writing, and people studying Avakum. Yeah, Marietta, you wanted to respond, I think.
Yeah, if I may, on that subject of mixing and these different seemingly opposing forces and drives, which I would like to suggest aren't contradictory, and we don't need to choose between them. I think there are moments when there are either intellectual events or historical events or ideas that drive us towards medical humanities, environmental humanities, precisely because we want to use the tools that we have to make sense of the world around us in a way that feels satisfying and purposeful. But then there are also times that we want to escape, that we want to push all that aside and do knowledge production for specialists, for posterity. And I don't see these I don't see this as something one needs to choose between permanently. I want to have it both ways.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've been doing, we have been doing that also in the past years, not choosing, but bringing it together. But I would also like to revisit the notes of this meeting later and actually keep thinking about new ways also to keep bridging that seeming contradiction, which indeed does not need to be a contradiction. I'm trying to see if there are any last questions, because if not, I want to show you one thing and I would like to start gradually wrapping up. I see also, yes, good point, a suggestion by one of our audience members who says, I would be interested in Russian young adult literature. Yeah, that would be really interesting too. And also interesting, I think, in view of the history of children's writing, young adult writing also in Russia and the Soviet Union, and to look at what is coming out now. That's a great suggestion. Yeah, just in case this is not already in our notes. What I want to show you, so if very urgent questions come up, please share them, but if not, I want to show you something that Gernot Hoanitz, together with Marietta Bozovic, is making for us right now as we speak. This is correct, right, Marietta? This is a topic modeling of the journal's history. Maybe you can say just a few words about it before I conclude our meeting with a few last words.
Sure. For an in-depth explanation of what topic modeling is and how it works, I would direct readers to the DH special issue. But say in brief that it's algorithmic dividing up of the journal's content into the kinds of words, the language that tends to appear together in articles. So this is an algorithms pass non-human intervention into dividing the journal. And of course, you see various forms of noise, but it's amazing that even in a very first pass, you also see that there is coherence. There's a really interesting, mandeshtam, image metaphor, stories, narrative, story, characters, hero, male, female, women, sexual, gender topic. Of course, we ascribe meaning to it afterwards as researchers, but the topic model is interactive so that you can see then some of these articles that are highly represented by specific topics. And it's a fun way of poking through the journal's history in a quite estranged manner. One thing I will say I'm especially proud of, however, in the digital humanities special issue is that at the same time as we playfully borrow tools and methods from all over, we use our own theoretical foundation, Russian formalism, Bakhtin, to actually push back against some of these methods as well. So for example, many discussions of topic modeling in the social sciences and in humanities application begin with an obligatory nod to Bakhtin. We say, this is fun, but this has nothing to do with Bakhtin. Ditto with claims that digital humanities can be thought of as formalism 2.0 and a direct continuation of Shklovsky and Sinyanov. We'd say, you know, we love it, but we respectfully disagree.
Thanks so much. I'll move from that share to my last slides because here they are. So thanks for that update, Marietta. Mark was just saying, why doesn't Russian literature have a Facebook page? We do. If you just type Russian literature Elsevier, you can access it on Facebook. And as I said earlier, especially sometimes I post something there, but especially Dennis and Alexei are consistently posting abstracts or short introductions with a few lines on new articles that we are appearing and new issues that we're publishing there. So that's a good place to keep on track. And on Rus literature on Twitter, Helene de Vries, who is our Twitter editor, I actually should have put her on that page with faces and makers of the journal. I now realize that I forgot. Helene de Vries, she does this interesting thing for us where she follows new issues, and for every separate article she posts tweets, sometimes retweets, and also event link. That's about communication. I also wanted to say that so Marietta just shared this topic modeling analysis. As said, you are co-authoring it, but that's together with Gernot Hobanitz, a scholar Slavic scholar based in Austria. This will be one Jubilee devoted contribution to our Jubilee issue. Well, not the upcoming issue, but the upcoming issue, the last one of 2021. And another Jubilee moment that we'll be having very soon already is poet and nonfiction writer Maria Stepanova has browsed our archives and has handpicked a selection of articles that she found particularly stimulating, and we will post her short text on those articles on our website, and we will also share it elsewhere. I think this is what I needed to say. As said, our Jubilee volume, and I think also after the discussions of today, that's nice to see. Our Jubilee volume will be a volume which both includes this topic modeling analysis, but also, I'll stop sharing meanwhile so that I can see your faces, but also 6 hardcore Russian literature articles, I think that's how you would call it, Ilan Westein on TEFI. So that's this interesting combination of work with very new methodologies and what would be the right term, zooming in very much on knowledge building around this one author. So that's a Jubilee issue. And I think I just want to conclude by once again thanking everyone who contributed to this discussion. I really am taking home a lot, so that's very good, I think. Oh, I see one question before we conclude entirely. Elizabeth Emmanuel, that's the last question we discussed, says, how about authors that are not Russian, but write in Russian I did not get that part entirely in the journal. I think this is returning to Naomi, the contribution that you gave, right? So we will publish a special issue on what is called, in the title of that issue, Russophone literature, which can mean different things. But in this case, if I paraphrase correctly, Naomi, it's going to be about authors who write in Russian, but do not have a Russian passport, who, for instance, have a Ukrainian passport or Belarusian. So they are not Russian, but they write in Russian. So it's not the case that we publish their work itself, but a cluster with analysis devoted to their work. Yeah, okay, I see Naomi nodding. Will appear in the journal. So I once again thank you. I thank the Department of Slavic Studies of the University of Amsterdam. I thank the IMLI, the Gorky Institute of World Literature of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and also Vadim Polonsky for their support for this meeting. I want to thank you all, and I will linger a bit. I'm not going to wrap up rigidly and say these are the hard conclusions that we can draw from this discussion, but I really look forward to hanging above what all of you have said a bit more when I look at my notes. There is the note taker appearing now with us. Ilya, thank you so much. And you'll see more of that in the journal. So as I said, I won't leave instantly. We'll linger a bit here before leaving, but thank you so much, all of you. Thanks, and thanks also, Alexei, for joining us after a long session.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Willem.
Thanks.
Yeah. I wish you all a good evening. Those of you who are still